When we talk about this issue of slavery and the Missouri Compromise and this continual keeping score of free states versus slave states, opinions are going to vary concerning that new land that we acquired from Mexico by virtue of our victory in the Mexican War. And there were 5 different American politicians who had 4 differing opinions on what should happen in those lands that we acquired from Mexico concerning what? Slavery, right? Now these are just territories now, but still people are moving into them. And so we got to make decisions whether we're going to allow slaves in these territories or not, because once they apply for admission into the Union as a state, that would already be established. And a lot of people are wondering, now what are we doing with this land we got from Mexico? What's it going to be? What's the issue of slavery going to be? Okay, so I'm going to again tell you about 5 different American politicians who have 4 different opinions on what we should do. Who's the most important politician right now?
President.
President James K. Polk. So we'll start with him. This is President James K. Polk's opinion on what we should do concerning slavery in the new land acquired from Mexico. Now, he's a politician, so what does he point to that we talked to yesterday that should be the deciding factor? What did we talk about yesterday? The Missouri Compromise. In all lands north of 3630 would be free. All lands south of 3630, latitude 3630, would be slave. So his opinion is, hey, we'll just settle the issue of slavery as a result of the Missouri Compromise of 1820, meaning that there would be no slavery north of latitude 3630, and there would be slavery allowed south of latitude 3630. Yeah.
So does that mean for like California, we just have to happen in North
We'll get to that. It's interesting, yeah. These are just opinions at this point, right? Now, there was a pretty influential Democratic congressman by the name of David Wilmot. David Wilmot. And a congressman means they're in the House of Representatives. So this guy is a very influential Democratic member of the House of Representatives, David Wilmot. And his position on those lands we acquired from Mexico is he opposed slavery in any of the new lands that we acquired from Mexico. So President Polk says, let's decide by the Missouri Compromise of 1820, lands north of 3630 will be free, lands south, slave. Democratic Congressman David Wilmot opposes slavery in any of the new lands we acquired from Mexico. Your third politician's an elder statesman now, John C. Calhoun. John C. Calhoun. And he states Congress has no right to prohibit slavery anywhere in the lands acquired from Mexico. So elder statesman John C. Calhoun insists that Congress has no right to prohibit slavery in any.
And he's pretty big in the South, right?
Oh, yeah. He's the one, what did Andrew Jackson, did he have something to do with him?
Yeah, it was like in South Carolina.
You're going to hang him, right? Yeah, we're going to hang him. He's older now, but he just is still a little bit radical from the South, and he says, hey, Congress doesn't have the right to prohibit slavery in any of those lands. A Michigan senator by the name of Lewis Cass, a Michigan senator by the name of Lewis Cass, thinks that the citizens that are living in each territory should be able to decide whether they're going to have slavery or not. So Michigan Senator Lewis Cass believes that the people that live in the territories should decide whether there should be slavery or not. And in agreeing with him is Illinois Senator Stephen Douglas, who also believes that the people that live in the territories and lands we acquired from Mexico should decide the issue of slavery. So Cass and Douglas, both influential senators, Cass from Michigan and Douglas from Illinois both believed that this issue of slavery and those lands we acquired from Mexico should be decided by the people that inhabit or live in the territory. Because what are they going to do when they get organized in the territory? They're going to put together a territorial constitution and some sort of a form of government. And at that point, he believes that those people that do that should decide which way they're going to go. So there are your differing opinions. President Polk, let's just settle it by the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Democratic Congressman David Wilmot opposes slavery in any of the lands we got from Mexico. Elder statesman John C. Calhoun simply states, Congress, you don't have the right to prohibit slavery anywhere in the lands we acquired from Mexico. And Michigan Senator Lewis Cass and Illinois Senator Stephen Douglas believe that the citizens of each of those territories, once inhibited, should make that decision. Okay, so we still haven't got a decision yet. That's just the varying opinions. Well, that's going to take us to a presidential election. Interesting one. The election of 1848. So what's going to be the big campaign issue in this election?
No slavery, no slavery.
Yeah, what are we going to do with the lands that we acquired from Mexico? Okay? It's going to be the hot topic in 1848. What political parties do we have? Republicans made any kind of a comeback yet?
Not
No.
really.
So we still have the Democrats and the Whigs. Very good. Now it's kind of interesting because neither party really gave their opinions on this subject, even though it was a hot topic during the election. Why didn't they want to give an opinion?
Because they didn't know themselves.
Because it was opposing both sides.
You couldn't win. There was no win. They thought they'd lose popularity if they picked either way.
Yeah.
So both sides just decided to kind of take their chances. And this is why this is kind of a weird election. Now, President Polk decided he would not run for re-election in 1848. And so the man that the Democrats nominate is Senator Lewis Cass of Michigan, who we just talked about. But he's made it pretty clear that he thinks that slavery ought to be decided by the people that live in the territory. So, I mean, that's the Democratic stand if you nominate Lewis Cass as your candidate, okay? So President Polk refuses to run for re-election in 1848, so Senator Lewis Cass of Michigan is the nominee. Well, the Whigs really don't have a good candidate. So they go out and they nominate General Zachary Taylor for the presidency. Mexican war hero, no political experience at all. Has no IDs, a military guy, right? So the Whigs kind of come up with what many consider a pretty weak candidate, Zachary Taylor, okay? He has no political experience, no political views. He is simply a great military hero from the Mexican War. That's what he is. Well, Americans aren't really too thrilled really with either candidate, so whenever that happens, you always seem to get a third party to come in. And this election, the third party became known as the Free Soil Party. Free Soil Party. And interesting enough, they could sense that Lewis Cass maybe wasn't the answer, and certainly Zachary Taylor wasn't the answer, right? So who might you nominate? Someone that had a lot of good political experience, maybe a former president, like Martin Van Buren. So that's what the Free Soil Party does, is they nominate former President Martin Van Buren.
How would he get any votes when he took him to the Depression?
Well, he's going to get some, not a lot, but he's going to get enough to matter, okay? Martin Van Buren. Van Buren is V-A-N, which is one word, so to speak, and Buren, B-U-R-E-N. Now, they had a campaign slogan, the old Free Soil Party: free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men. So there was the campaign slogan for the Free Soil Party in 1848. Free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men. Free soil, free speech, free soil, free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men. Now, typically when a third party comes in, they take votes away from somebody. So people that would normally have voted for somebody vote for that person, and usually it goes down party lines. Well, it just so happens that the Free Soil Party and Martin Van Buren, they didn't win a single state, but they captured many Democratic votes that would have gone to Lewis Cass if there wouldn't have been a third party. So the people that end up voting for Van Buren are Democrats, which takes votes away from who? Lewis Cass. As a result of that split, Zachary Taylor receives the 2/3 majority electoral votes and becomes the nation's 12th president. A guy that has absolutely no political experience, absolutely no political agenda or knowledge, becomes your 12th president of the United States, Zachary Taylor. So as a result of the split in votes, Zachary Taylor receives the required number of electoral votes and becomes the nation's 12th president. Ooh, interesting. Historians said he was a square peg in a round hole. He was a politically square peg in a military round hole. He just didn't fit at all. Okay, didn't fit at all. Okay, Compromise of 1850. This is a pretty good story. This is going to kind of lead us into some issues that'll take us to Civil War. Well, pretty easy to figure out. When Zachary Taylor is inaugurated in as the president, there's still a lot of controversy surrounding slavery. Both Northerners and Southerners are upset over the issue of slavery as events occur across the country, and I'm going to give you the 4 big issues at hand, the 4 problems that Zachary Taylor is dealing with as president concerning split feelings between Northerners and Southerners. First of all, Southerners are upset because California has done what? This answers your question, Austin. Well, yeah, you're right, but what have they done that would upset the Southerners? They've applied for what? Admission into the Union as a free state. That's going to upset the balance, okay? So the first issue at hand that Taylor has to deal with concerning slavery is that Southerners are upset because California had submitted paperwork to be admitted into the Union as a free state. This is going to upset the balance. Number 2, both Southerners and Northerners are upset because the issue of slavery in the Mexican territory, the land that we acquired from Mexico, still has not been settled. So both Northerners and Southerners are upset because the issue of slavery, as far as land that we acquired from Mexico, still remains unsettled. And both sides are upset because they want to get this figured out. Number 3, Southerners are upset because the North is pushing for a law that would abolish slavery in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. So the Southerners are upset because Northerners are pushing for a law that would abolish slavery in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. There was actually, slavery was legal in our nation's capital. And the Northerners wanted to put an end to that, and Southerners were upset. And the 4th issue at hand was that Northerners were upset because Southerners were pushing for a fugitive slave law, which is on your ID sheet. So Northerners are upset because Southerners are pushing for a fugitive slave law. Anybody know what a fugitive slave law was?
Like if they go to a free state, so they capture and take them back to them.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a law in which if slaves escaped the South and went to the North, it was illegal to harbor them. If you found a slave that belonged to somebody else and you were a Northerner, you had an obligation to report that, and the slave would be taken back to its owner. So the idea of if you slip into Northern Territory, you're good. If they put in a fugitive slave law, you're not good, because you would get arrested if you had knowledge that a slave belonged to somebody in the South and you did not turn him in to be sent back. And Northerners were upset about that, because obviously they didn't believe in slavery, right? Well, somebody's got to come in and be the great compromiser. Somebody's got to come in and settle this, because if it doesn't get settled, where are we going, probably? To a civil war, yeah. Who's going to be this great compromiser? Who is the aged, ill, and weary man that we've heard of that comes in and puts together a compromise to get everybody happy? Henry Clay. Very good. So, an aged, ill, and weary Henry Clay comes upon the scene of American history and assumes the role of the great compromiser. He actually was given this nickname after the events of this particular subtopic. So an aged, ill, and weary Henry Clay comes onto the scene again of American history, and he assumes the role of the great compromiser. Now, Clay's proposed compromise would consist of the following 4 proposals. These are the 4 things he proposes to make everything go away. Okay? Get Northerners and Southerners to agree. Number 1, he said, let's admit California into the Union as a free state. Let's go ahead and admit California into the Union as a free state. It's coming anyway. It's inevitable. So let's go ahead and admit California into the Union as a free state. Now that doesn't help the fact that Southerners are upset, but it cuts to the chase. We're not going to have any controversy over California. We're just bringing them in as a free state. What was the second thing that was bothering everybody?
DC code.
Not yet. What do we do with the lands of Mexico, right? So his second proposal is we're going to organize all this land we got from Mexico, other than California, right? Because what's California going to do? Come in as a state. So all the other land that we got from Mexico, we would settle the issue of slavery by popular sovereignty, which is on your ID sheet. So he said, organize the land that was acquired from Mexico, obviously except for California, because it's going to come into the Union as a free state. Organize those into American territories, and we'll base the issue of slavery on popular sovereignty. So take all this land and organize it into the New Mexico territory, into the Arizona territory, or whatever, okay? And then we'll decide the issue of slavery by popular sovereignty. Anybody know what that is?
Popular vote.
Which goes back to who? Both Cass and Douglas, who said, let the people of the territories decide. What popular sovereignty means is exactly that. What the people in those areas say goes. Popular sovereignty, popular vote. So when they put together their constitutions, the people in those territories would vote. We want slavery or not. Whatever won would be the issue. Okay? So he said, let's organize this land. Let people settle it, put it into territories, and let the people decide by popular sovereignty whether there would be slavery or not, by popular vote. Third thing he proposed, he said we need to abolish the buying and selling of slaves in the District of Columbia. We need to abolish the buying and selling of slaves in the District of Columbia. Who's that going to make happy?
The North.
Who's going to be upset?
I feel like the North's getting good at this.
Well, now listen to what I said. Yeah, the abolishing of buying and selling slaves in the District of Columbia.
That doesn't mean having.
That's right.
Selling.
That's right. It says you can't buy or sell anymore, but it doesn't say you can't have them. There's your Clay's compromise, so to speak. So the North doesn't get the great end of the stick here.
Where is this at?
Okay, so the abolishing of buying and selling slaves in the District of Columbia. Didn't say anything about abolishing slavery itself. You just can't buy and sell anymore. If you have them, you can still have them. Can't bring any in. Okay, suppose if you want to take them out, you can. Can't buy or sell. And he also said, number 4, we will enact an effective fugitive slave law. We will enact an effective fugitive slave law that would require the state and local authorities in the North to capture and return any runaway slaves back to the Southern owners. So, he says, 1, we're going to admit California into the Union as a state. Favoring? No. 2, we're going to organize the land that we acquired from Mexico and let the people decide, which satisfies both. We're going to abolish the buying and selling of slaves in the District of Columbia, which gives the North a point, but we're not going to abolish slavery itself. And then we're going to enact the fugitive slave law. Okay, that was his compromise. Pretty well put together. Well, who has to pass this compromise? Who has to? Congress. And they debate on the floor for more than 6 months on whether they're going to accept this compromise or not. 6 months. Back and forth, whether they should have it or not. Reminds me of the government shutdown, only at least these guys were getting together and talking, right? Well, finally, in September of 1850, both houses of Congress, the House and the Senate, adopt all of Henry Clay's compromise proposals. Finally, in September of 1850, both houses of Congress adopt all of Henry Clay's compromise proposals. And they actually vote him in by large margins. So this talking for 6 months really probably made this more acceptable to both sides, because they passed by large votes. No controversy. Boom. Okay? Well, this compromise goes down in history